now live to the Senate, which is just gavelled back in for consideration of the President's pick for Commerce Secretary, then more on immigration.
30 minutes of debate, equally divided in the usual form.
Madam President.
The Senator from Illinois.
Madam President, thank you. For those who are following the debate in the Senate, we are in the midst of the debate on the immigration reform bill, expecting votes on amendments this week and then final passage. It's an historic and important measure, and we have interrupted it briefly to consider a nomination that is important as well. It's the nomination by President Obama of Penny Pritzker of Chicago to be the next Secretary of Commerce in the President's cabinet. I know Penny Pritzker, and I know her family, and I know the reputation they enjoy in Chicago, in Illinois, and around the world. She's an extraordinary person. The Pritzker family has been successful in business for many decades and many generations. She stepped up years ago and said to her father that she wanted to play a role in business leadership. There weren't that many women involved in business leadership at that time, but her father said he'd give her an opportunity, and he did. She became very successful with the corporation, with the family businesses, and has made a name for herself over the years. She has decades of business, entrepreneurial, and equally important for this job, civic experience. Despite her success in the private sector, Penny Pritzker and her family have given unsparingly of their own time to help many important causes. She understands business and economic development, but she also understands the reality of the challenges that many families face across our country. We know the jobs report from earlier this month showed that we had 6.9 million jobs created over 39 consecutive months of private sector job growth. That's progress. We've come a long way. But let's make no mistake, families are still struggling to find work, and many that are working are struggling paycheck to paycheck to survive. Penny Pritzker will bring considerable experience to the Department of Commerce to help us create new businesses and job opportunities in America. She understands what it takes to build a business from scratch. She's done it 5 different times with startup businesses. She's created jobs that support families and communities across America. More than creating jobs, she's helped countless people get the education they need to connect them with job opportunities. She leads Skills for America's Future, a national program bringing together business, community colleges, and others, preparing workers for good-paying 21st century jobs. In addition to education, Penny Pritzker is an ardent supporter of the arts, which support economic development and tourism across the nation. She's a member of the American Academy of the Arts and Sciences and a trustee of the Kennedy Center. There's no question that our economy is headed in the right direction. The question is, who will pursue today's efforts to continue that growth and lead us to future success? Who will continue efforts to help American businesses in the global marketplace? We're on the right track. Too many businesses, however, in America are still struggling to survive. Expanding to new markets is one way to help American business and our economy. We need a Secretary of Commerce who will not only help small businesses grow and create jobs, but also open opportunities for businesses to expand their products and services across the state, the country, and the globe. Penny Pritzker called me a couple weeks ago and urged me, if possible, to do everything I could to try to get her nomination moving before July. I talked to Senator Reid, who was fully supportive of the President's nominee. The reason she's anxious to do that is important trade discussions are going to begin after the 1st of July with some of the leading economic powers around the world. She wanted to be at that table. It's important for America that she is. She knows what it takes to make business work. She knows the tools that businesses need. What's more, she knows economic development at all levels. Colleagues from both sides of the aisles agree that we need job creation. Penny Pritzker has a proven track record in promoting jobs and growth, and her leadership will help our country. Her decades of experience will serve her well. Ms. Pritzker's wide-ranging perspective will prove worthwhile to the future of our nation as we compete in the global marketplace. I urge my colleagues to support Ms. Penny Pritzker's nomination and look forward to working with her as she is, hopefully, going to be the next Secretary of Commerce under the Obama administration. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Senator from Arkansas.
Madam President, I also rise and support Penny Pritzker for Secretary of Commerce. I think she'll do an excellent job. Now, Madam President, I'd ask unanimous consent that the following comments would be considered as part of morning business, and I'll only take, say, 3 or 4 minutes.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise today to honor Ken Duke of Hope, Arkansas. Ken is an incredible athlete that has a great story, and he's actually here with us today in the gallery. He years ago was diagnosed with scoliosis as a teenager, and he was forced for years to wear a back brace. And there were times when he had to wear that back brace for 23 hours a day. He underwent surgery and numerous treatments. Eventually, they put a metal rod in his spine, and the rod is still there today. Now, despite of all those tough circumstances, he persevered. And he went on to win his high school district golf tournament. He was wearing the back brace, no less. And then he became, in recent years, a strong advocate for those suffering spinal problems. And he now hosts an annual charity golf tournament called A Day with Duke. Anyway, after playing golf for Henderson State Universities, and might I say, go Reddies, after he played for Henderson State University, he turned professional. And like many professional golfers, he had his good days and bad days. He had his ups and downs, and that's a tough life. And he's been out there plugging away week in, week out. But this past Sunday, Ken had one of his best days of golf that he's ever had in his career. At the Travelers Championship in Cromwell, Connecticut, Duke faced a tense playoff with Chris Stroud. After Stroud had chipped in on the 18th hole, the men were neck and neck, both with 12 under pars. But Ken pushed ahead, making a 2.5-foot birdie putt on the second playoff hole to clinch his first PGA Tour victory. This was not only a great shot in a great round of golf, but it's also a great American story. Arkansas is very proud of Ken, and we hope that there are many, many wins in the future. And I just want to say congratulations. And Madam President, with that, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Madam President.
The senator from West Virginia.
Madam President, I ask that the order of the quorum call be rescinded.
Without objection.
Madam President, I have the honor to chair the Commerce Committee and thus have enormous interest in who our next Commerce Secretary is going to be. I don't think the President could have picked anybody better. I've known Penny Pritzker for 30 years. I got Chicago relations in my family, too. And she is a force of nature. That's the thing I want people to understand. She is a force of nature. Yes, she's wealthy. Yes, she's experienced in business. Yes, she's experienced in public service. She is a tiger of energy and purpose. The Department of Commerce is probably the most complicated, I don't know about DOD, but I think it's the most complicated non-DOD agency. I mean, you have oceans, spectrum, aviation, trains, distracted. I mean, there's 1,000 different areas, including all the oceans. And it takes a real leader. It takes a tough person. And we haven't had a tough enough person for a while. We had one, but then because of health reasons, that person had to resign. And I cannot imagine a better, and I don't say these things often about nominees, I cannot imagine a more perfect person to run the Department of Commerce than Penny Pritzker. And I hope that my colleagues will vote for her overwhelmingly. I thank the Chair and yield the floor. Note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Senate this afternoon considering the nomination of President Obama for Commerce Secretary Penny Pritzker. Vote on that schedule at 2:45, and then the Senate will return to work on immigration. The President right now speaking at Georgetown University on global climate change, calling for a comprehensive plan to reduce carbon pollution, also calling on the U.S. to prepare for the effects of climate change, like severe weather. You can watch that live right now on C-SPAN 3. Again, Senate in a quorum call considering the nomination of the President's pick for Commerce Secretary and then returning to work on the immigration bill.
Madam President, I rise today to speak.
The Senate is in a quorum
Oh,
call.
I ask unanimous consent the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Madam President, I rise today to speak once again on the immigration bill before us. Before there was a Judiciary Committee markup, before there was an immigration bill, and before there was even a Gang of Eight, most senators had three basic beliefs. The immigration system is broken, fixing it will be neither simple nor easy, and it absolutely needs to be done. I share those beliefs. I also rely on two sets of experience. I served in this body and on the Judiciary Committee during the 99th Congress when we considered the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986, commonly called the Simpson-Mazzoli Bill, and during the 117th Congress when we considered the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Act of 2007. I voted against both of them. I opposed the 1986 legislation because it was self-proclaimed amnesty. I opposed the 2007 legislation because it had been developed outside of the Judiciary Committee. My participation in the current immigration reform effort has been informed by those beliefs and those experiences. We simply must fix our broken immigration system. But in doing so, we must not repeat either of those substantive errors from 1986 or the procedural errors from 2007. As we all know, most of the media and political attention is focused on border security and legalization parts of this bill. But there's much more to it than that. I initially focused on two areas. First, working with Senators Rubio, Coons, and Klobuchar, I focused on increased opportunities for high-skilled immigrants. The bill we introduced, the I-squared bill, now has 28 bipartisan co-sponsors. Secondly, working with Senators Rubio, Feinstein, and Bennett, I focused on developing the guest worker program that will be so important for the agricultural sector of our economy. Those discussions were led by Senator Feinstein, and there's no question I played a significant role in those. This program is the product of true compromise between farm workers and growers. I had real questions whether that could be done, but it was. I was glad to see it included as part of the Gang of Eight's original bill. Another important provision that was made part of the original bill was my proposal for permanently extending a visa program for religious workers. This provision will provide up to 5,000 visas for foreign nationals to work with religious organizations that help America's neediest people and underserved communities. I have supported this program for many years and am very grateful that the Gang of Eight offered to include it in the bill at my request. In addition, I commend the Judiciary Committee Chairman, Sarah Leahy, for conducting an open, fair, and thorough markup of S-744. Thankfully, this bill, unlike the bill in 2007, is being handled through regular order. During the committee's consideration of S-744, I filed 24 amendments, 20 of them within Judiciary Committee jurisdiction. I am proud of the fact that 15 of those 20 amendments were made part of the legislation that is before us now. I don't think proud's the word. I'm pleased rather than proud. For example, the committee adopted by voice vote my amendment establishing strong penalties for cultivating marijuana on federal lands. Mexican drug cartels are driving the expansion of this plague, using chemicals and diverting water sources that also harm the environment. My amendment will reduce the illegal drugs that enter the market and protect America's natural resources at the same time. The committee also adopted my amendment to establish a mandatory biometric exit system at the 10 busiest international airports. Preventing individuals from entering the country illegally is only one side of the coin. The other side, of course, is preventing individuals from overstaying their visas. And we know if that works in those airports, we then will, I think, be encouraged to expand that in many other ways. Nearly half of those who are currently here illegally came into the country legally. that did not leave when they were supposed to. My amendment tackles part of that equation. I do want to respond to what some of my colleagues have said about this new biometric system. Some have claimed that my amendment dials back current law. Let me be clear. I fully support the biometric exit system provided for under current law. Sadly, it has not been properly implemented. What good is it if legislation simply remains on paper? Do the critics of my amendment prefer the status quo, which has accomplished absolutely nothing? My amendment will actually deploy a real biometric exit system, something that current law has failed to do. And by the way, it's fully paid for. Trust me, this is more than just a fig leaf. The Judiciary Committee also adopted, once again by voice vote, my amendment to improve education and training in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and math, or the STEM fields. While foreign high-skilled workers play an important part in our economy, we need to invest more in developing the American workforce, especially the next generation. I look forward to seeing the STEM account grow and provide hundreds of millions of dollars directly to the states for this critical education and training. That's in the bill now. I am particularly pleased that the Judiciary Committee adopted a package of my amendments establishing a coherent and constructive approach to high-skilled immigration. These provisions will ensure that the H-1B and L-1 visa categories actually work for a change. I especially want to thank Senators Schumer and Durbin for their genuine willingness to compromise, because these complex issues require a delicate balance of interests. This is the path I have pursued so far. From the outset of this process, I've made it clear that there are issues with this bill under the jurisdiction of the Finance Committee. As the ranking member of the Finance Committee, I've been working in good faith to ensure that those matters are addressed in a responsible and productive way. Toward that end, I filed amendments both in committee and here on the floor, and have been working with my colleagues to get them included. These are important issues that simply cannot be overlooked. For example, there was the issue of whether immigrants receiving a change in status would be allowed to receive welfare benefits. Under a long-standing provision of federal law, non-citizens, including legal immigrants, are not eligible for federal cash welfare benefits for their first 5 years in the country. While S-44 preserved that 5-year ban for RPIs, I know that the Obama administration believes it has the authority to permit states to spend federal welfare dollars on cash benefits to previously prohibited individuals. In order to prevent this or future administrations from contravening federal welfare law, we needed to clarify that the Secretary of Health and Human Services cannot permit federal welfare dollars from being spent on non-citizens. That's a system I'm unwilling to support. And I'm pleased that they accepted my amendment solving that problem. Today, I'm pleased to report that we have successfully negotiated provisions that will prevent the administration from waiving the 5-year ban on welfare benefits, as well as prohibiting the Secretary from permitting this type of spending. They have been included as part of the compromise package we'll be voting on later this week. Another problem with the original bill was that it did not adequately address Social Security. Specifically, the bill did not state how periods of unauthorized employment would be treated in the calculation of Social Security benefits. Once again, I have worked with my colleagues to reach an agreement on a provision that says that periods of unauthorized earnings do not count toward determining Social Security benefits. The provision will, among other things, prevent people who did not have authorization to work in this country from going back and retroactively claiming unauthorized periods of work in which they used made up or stolen Social Security numbers. This is a necessary step that will help to preserve the integrity of our Social Security system. As with the provision on welfare benefits, this provision is part of the Leahy Compromise amendment. According to the Congressional Budget Office and the Joint Committee on Taxation, this provision will result in lower spending for Social Security and Medicare. While I am pleased that we've been able to reach agreement on these important issues, there are other Finance Committee issues that have not been addressed. There's the issue of when those on the RPI or Blue Card pathways will be eligible for tax credits and health insurance premium subsidies under the Affordable Care Act. I filed an amendment that would have placed those subsidies in the same category as other federal means-tested programs, which of course includes a 5-year waiting period once an immigrant status attains the status of a lawful permanent resident. This is also the issue of back taxes. There is also the issue of back taxes. I filed an amendment that would have required all RPI applicants to pay their back taxes as a condition of receiving a change in status. Neither of these two issues is adequately addressed by the current version of the legislation. In my view, these are serious problems that will need to be fixed before the bill is suitable for the President's signature. On top of that, there's still the issue of border security. While the compromise legislation we'll be voting on this week significantly improves upon the original draft of this bill, I believe we can and should do more. So as you see, Madam President, there's still a number of issues that need to be resolved. However, as I've said all along, this is a process. Reporting the bill out of the Judiciary Committee was one step in that process, and passing the bill here on the Senate floor is another step, a first step. I don't think anyone should be under any illusions that when the Senate completes its work on the legislation this week, the process is finished. The House of Representatives is working on its own bill with an entirely different approach. I've already begun reaching out to my House colleagues to help address these issues that I believe are important, particularly those that fall under the jurisdiction of the Senate Finance Committee. I hope that the House will work to address what I see as significant shortcomings in the Senate bill, and I will work hard to ensure that those issues are resolved should the bill go to conference. With that in mind, I plan to vote in favor of S-744 later this week. As I said before, I share the belief of most of my colleagues that the current immigration system is broken and that reform is absolutely necessary. As I see it, the only way that we can reach that goal is to allow the process to move forward. Once again, I'd like to commend my colleagues for their work on this legislation thus far. I hope they'll keep an open mind on future changes as well. And while the final product is far from perfect, I believe we're on a path to reaching a reasonable solution to the problems that continue to plague our nation's immigration system. I look forward to working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle and on both sides of the Capitol to move this process forward towards successful conclusion. Madam President, I yield the floor. In fact, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
You see, Senators, in the middle of the screen there, a vote coming up shortly on the nomination of Commerce Secretary Penny Pritzker that's scheduled to take place momentarily. After that vote, Senators expected to return to work on the immigration bill. That measure would increase border security and workplace enforcement, allow additional high and low-skilled workers into the country, and create a path to citizenship for illegal immigrants. More amendments to come on that bill, and Majority Leader Reid said he hopes to finish up the bill by the end of this week. We'll look in on the Senate floor now.
Without objection. The question occurs on the nomination. Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. There is. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander. Ms. Ayotte. Ms. Baldwin. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Baucus. Mr. Beckich, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Blumenthal, Mr. Blunt, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Boxer, Mr. Brown, Mr. Burr, Ms. Cantwell, Mr. Cardin, Mr. Carper, Mr. Casey, Mr. Chambliss, Mr. Chiesa, Mr. Coates, Mr. Coburn, Mr. Cochran, Ms. Collins, Mr. Coons, Mr. Corker, Mr. Cornyn, Mr. Cowan, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Cruz, Mr. Donnelly, Mr. Durbin, Mr. Enzi, Mrs. Feinstein, Mrs. Fisher, Mr. Flake, Mr. Prankin, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mrs. Hagan, Mr. Harkin, Mr. Heinrich, Ms. Heitkamp, Mr. Heller, Mr. Rono, Mr. Hoven, Mr. Inhofe, Mr. Isaacson, Mr. Johans, Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, Mr. Johnson of South Dakota, Mr. Kane, Mr. King, Mr. Kirk, Ms. Klobuchar, Ms. Landrieu, Mr. Leahy, Mr. Lee, Mr. Levin, Mr. Manchin, Mr. McCain, Mrs. McCaskill, Mr. McConnell,
So you expect the point of order to be against Leahy?
Mr. Menendez, Mr. Merkley, Ms. Mikulski,
Point of order is raised tomorrow. Is that what you're thinking?
Mr. Moran, Ms. Murkowski,
Okay.
Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray,
Nifty.
Mrs. Murray, Mr. Nelson, Mr. Paul,
Plain water with ice.
Mr. Portman, Mr. Pryor, Mr. Reed of Rhode Island, Mr. Reed of Nevada, Mr. Risch, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Rockefeller, Mr. Rubio, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott, Mr. Sessions, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Shelby, Ms. Stabenow, Mr. Tester, Mr. Thune.
Aye.
No. Mr. Toomey, Mr. Udall of Colorado, Mr. Udall of New Mexico, Mr. Vitter, Mr. Warner, Ms. Warren, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Senators voting in the affirmative: Alexander, Baldwin, Baucus, Beckich, Blunt, Boxer, Brown, Cantwell, Cardin, Chiesa, Cochran, Collins, Coons, Corker, Cornyn, Cowan, Donnelly, Graham, Hagan, Harkin, Hatch, Heitkamp, Heller, Isaacson, Johans, Manchin, McCain, Mikulski, Murray, Nelson, Schumer, Tester, Udall of Colorado, Udall of New Mexico, Warner, and Warren. Mr. Kane, aye. Mr. Franken, aye. Mr. Coates, aye. Mr. Reed? Mr. Reed of Nevada, aye. Mr. Casey? Mr. Casey, aye. No senator voted in the negative. Mr. Leahy, aye. Mr. Vitter, aye. Mr. Bozeman, aye. Ms. Ayotte? Ms. Ayotte, aye. Mr. Carper? Mr. Carper, aye. Mr. Durbin, aye. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Cruz, aye. Mr. Wyden, aye. Mr. Johnson of South Dakota, aye. Mr. Merkley. Mr. Merkley, aye. Mrs. Fisher. Mrs. Fisher, aye. Ms. Stabenow, aye. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, aye.
Once the E is adopted, yes. Correct.
Mrs. Shaheen, aye. Mr. Sanders, no. Ms. Hirono, aye. Mr. Grassley, aye. Ms. Klobuchar, aye. Mr. Rockefeller, aye. Ms. Murkowski, aye. Mr. Levin, aye. Mr. Hoven. Mr. Hoven, aye. Mr. Inhofe, aye. Mr. Paul, aye. Mr. Shelby. Mr. Shelby, aye. Mr. Kirk. Mr. Kirk, aye. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Crapo, aye. Yes, I got you. Mr. Risch, aye. Mr. King, aye. Mr. Flake, aye. Mr. Bennett? Aye. Mr. Coburn? Aye. Mr. Chambliss? Aye. Mrs. Feinstein? Aye. Mr. Burr? Aye. Mr. McConnell? Mr. McConnell? Aye. Ms. Landrieu? Aye. Mr. Menendez? Mr. Menendez? Aye. Mr. Reed of Rhode Island? Aye. Mr. Barrasso? Aye. Mr. Toomey? Aye. Mr. Wicker? Aye. Mr. Murphy? Mr. Murphy? Aye. Mr. Thune? Mr. Thune? Aye. Aye. Mr. Moran? Aye. Mr. Enzi? Aye. Mr. Roberts? Aye. Mr. Scott? Aye. Mr. Blumenthal? Aye. Mr. Portman? Aye. Mr. Sessions? Aye. Mr. Pryor? Aye. Yeah. Mrs. McCaskill, aye. Mr. Rubio, aye. Mrs. Tillebrand, aye. Mr. Schatz, aye. Mr. Heinrich, aye.
any senators in the chamber wishing to vote or change their votes? If not, the yeas are 97, the nays are 1, and the nomination is confirmed.
Madam President.
Senator from Minnesota.
Madam President, that's a clear, good vote for our new Commerce Secretary. We're very excited about that vote, 97-1. I'm going to speak to that, but before I do that, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague from the state of Louisiana, Senator Landrieu, for 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
1 second, if I may, Senator. The motion to reconsider is considered made and laid on the table. Senate will resume legislative session.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm just going to speak as in morning business for up to 2 or 3 minutes. I just want to take a point of personal privilege. Mr. President, as we get to the end of this immigration debate and hopefully have a final vote on this bill sometime this week, it's a very important issue for our country. There have been any number of senators that have been involved in trying to negotiate a very complex and tough bill. And the Gang of Eight has done a terrific job, in my view, of managing lots of very controversial aspects to this bill. But a group of us, not connected directly to the Gang of Eight, have been working on a group of amendments that are not central to the bill, or rather potentially, let me say, non-controversial. We have been working with Republicans and Democrats parallel to the Gang of Eight. And I only ask the leadership on both sides, the Republican leadership, the Democratic leadership, to please look at the list that has been submitted to the record not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 5 times, that has been well circulated. And if there are any objections to the specific ideas in the bill, not objections to amendments or just specific objections to the ideas of the amendments, the substance of the amendments, please talk with me and I'll be happy to do everything I can, because, as the senator from Arizona knows so well, who's been in the middle of this debate now for a long time, there have been hundreds of amendments offered in judiciary and voted on. There are over 250 amendments pending on the floor. Some of them are extremely controversial. The Republicans would like to vote on some of those. There are others that the Democrats want to vote on. I am fine to vote on all of them or none of them. I'll stay here all night and vote on them. I don't have a dog in that hunt. What I have is a small, relatively small group of amendments that Republicans and Democrats that are not in the Gang of Eight have voted on or have been talking about and working on, that to our knowledge, and our knowledge may not be complete, but to our knowledge have no voiced opposition against them. And we're just hoping that at whatever agreement is come to, whatever agreement, that this list of non-controversial amendments would at least be given a chance for a voice vote in globo. We don't need individual votes. We don't want a record vote. We just would like to have our voices heard. Now, see the senator from Arizona. Don't know if he wants to respond to this, but I'm happy if he wants to ask me a question or so.
Mr. President.
Senator from Arizona.
Mr. President, I can't speak for Senator Grassley, who is managing the bill in an outstanding fashion, but I would like to point out from conversations that I've had with Senator Grassley that these amendments are in the process, and as you mentioned, there are a number of them, of being cleared. In other words, rather than just being judged non-controversial, which I certainly accept the senator from Louisiana's word, we really need to clear them with everybody, and I hope she understands, and we hope that we can move forward rather rapidly with that process. I don't dispute that they are, quote, non-controversial, but every senator obviously wants to have these amendments cleared with them, and they've already started that process. So I appreciate the advocacy and the involvement of the senator from Louisiana. She's been extraordinarily involved in this issue by helping us make the package much better, and I hope she will show some more I emphasize more patience as we try to get this package agreed to by both sides.